Hi everyone, thanks so much for coming. It's a full house, this is fantastic. My name is Claudia Villacana. I manage the Bears for Financial Success Financial Wellness Program. So we're a program in Sproul Hall that teaches students about money management. We have workshops and one-on-one appointments. I'm going to leave some of our flyers here. We cover some pretty just basic topics like making a budget, managing student debt, all of that kind of thing. So all of our topics are on here. So for some of the more complicated topics like taxes, we tend to bring in some other experts that can speak to these kinds of things. So today we have two guests from the office of the UC Office of the President. We have Arthur, how do you say your last name? Kilau and Benjamin Tsai. So without further ado, I will hand it off to them. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone. Let's see, we're from the Office of the President, Tax Services in downtown Oakland. And so, wow, it's a lot of people here today. All right, so let's get started. All right, so this presentation, I'll just give you an idea of the scope of today's presentation. This presentation only applies to those of you who are UC students, and I'm sure you're all pretty much UC students. So we're assuming that you're not providing services for the university as students, and also this presentation is not intended to provide tax advice. It's just informational only and points to published resources such as the IRS and Franchise Tax Board, as well as some other university resources. And so our advice is to make sure you consult your personal tax advisor for more information. And yes.
Sorry, when you say that your assumption is that there are no services being performed by graduate students, are you referring to like ASU work, GSI, GSR? What do you mean?
So just usually we just put that disclaimer, general employment purposes. Although we may get to a little bit of that in case you happen to get a W-2, but it's only a little bit.
Just to let you know, the presentation is probably more geared for how to report fellowships. Where we talk about wages and other services, but it's just not the full, everything of this presentation.
It's definitely it's just not the main scope of it. Yeah. So let's see. There we go. Yeah, it's because the 15th is a Sunday, so it's not a business day. And then the 16th is Emancipation Day in Washington, D.C., so so the deadline this year is April 17th. But you're right, generally speaking, April 15th is the deadline.
Okay, so fellowship grants. So how does the IRS treat this in terms of reporting? The answer is it kind of depends. It's based on facts and circumstances. So when a student receives a fellowship or a grant, it's important to know what's tied to it. Is there facts and circumstances? Are you providing services, or is it just for school and tuition? Non-compensatory fellowship grants. So the key word is non-compensatory. That means not service related. So these are what's called true fellowship payments. Fellowship payments are not subject to your Social Security, OESDI, and Medicare. However, if you do receive this type of payment, a true fellowship, you may still have an obligation to report that as taxable income, as a non-qualified fellowship. We'll explain that in later slides. Now, compensatory fellowship grants, so the key word is compensatory. That means more service, whether it's dependent services. Dependent is when you have an employer-employee relationship, or dependent when you're kind of a contractor for university. It's probably kind of rare, but just in case if it hits anyone. The compensatory, there's a requirement for services, whether it's the current, the past, or the future. And there is a Social Security component, the OESDI and Medicare. and you will have to report this on your gross income. Typically, you'll get a tax form on this W-2 form. So, taxable versus non-taxable scholarships and fellowships. The non-taxable is when it's paid directly towards tuition, fees, cost of enrollment. This is codified by Internal Revenue Code. There's an exclusionary provision, IRC 170. So it's anything paid toward tuition and fees, and books, supplies, and anything required for enrollment. Non-taxable scholarships are referred to, These non-taxable scholarships are referred to as qualified scholarship fellowships, so excluded from income. The 1098T, this is the form that the UC will provide to students to report qualified tuition, school expenses. There's a scholarship and fellowship component, and it's generally provided to U.S. citizens and resident aliens. Can I just have a raise of hands? Is everyone here U.S. citizens, or do we have any foreign national students? Oh, so you're the foreign national students?
Which are you raising your hand?
Foreign national students. Okay, so we've got kind of both, half and half, U.S. citizens and foreign nationals could be considered non-resident aliens for tax, or resident aliens for tax, depending on how long you're in the country, depending on your visa. We'll get into that a little further when we talk about Glacier. So this is just a sample of the 1098T. I know on the UC Berkeley website they have got great resources, just in case if you didn't get it or if you have a question. There's always a phone number. I forgot the acronym, it's TCRS, but there's a phone number you can always reach. But anyway, this is the form. We've circled box 2 and box 5. Box 2 is amounts billed for qualified tuition and fees, and 5 is scholarships. I know next year, I know they've been working on this for a few years now, but next year, if box 2 has a number, that'll be wrong. It's going to be moved to box 1. So if you see it on box 1 or box 2, it doesn't really, it'll work the same, but next year you'll always see it in box 1. I highlighted something here, adjusted qualified education expenses. That is the net of these two numbers. The amount billed, that's $25,000 there, subtracted by the scholarship fellowship grants. So that would be reported as adjusted qualified education expenses to reduce your income taxes.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
That bill would be billed to us by university? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to figure out the qualified, you just subtract box 5 from box 2.
Yes. Right. Yes.
You have a question, Lola?
Can you repeat the questions and answers?
Okay, so the question was, what should you report as qualified education expenses? And the answer was you subtract box 2 from 5. 5 from 2. Yeah.
What is box number? I can't remember. It's 6. It's not one of the highlighted ones, but if there's something filled in there with
Adjustments to scholarship or grants for a prior year. Do you know anything about that?
That one I've never seen before, but chances are it'll most likely be some kind of a adjustment made involving box 5. But mainly you want to.
So how does that fit into your calculation for what is your either education expense or if you get net more scholarships, what your
Basically, if you have scholarships that are used toward tuition or the related expenses required for your enrollment, you'll have to deduct that from whatever tuition you paid. So then, whatever tuition you were billed. So then you can get the adjusted qualified education expenses, and that adjusted qualified education expense is actually what you will use to determine whether you'll take a deduction or a credit on your income tax returns.
and box 6 has nothing to do that.
I haven't seen.
Like I have something in there and I just don't know what to do.
Yeah, because we never seen we haven't seen box 6.
We could
before,
research
but we could take a look.
Yeah.
One of the things you could also do is is go to the IRS website and look up the instructions for the 1098T. So then just check out what box 6 is.
And just make sure you look at the current. So just go to irs.gov, type forms, and then look for the most current 1098T instructions. Yeah. Oh, okay. Hi.
So is this for only U.S. citizens or international?
You know, generally, I've always known this to be only for U.S. citizens and resident aliens. I've heard of one instance. I couldn't confirm, but that's what they told me. One person was foreign, so I was confused.
Basically, these are only supposed to be issued to
Yeah.
U.S. residents and U.S. citizens only. It's not supposed to be issued to.
Yeah,
to
you have to have
non-resident aliens.
a U.S. TIN number. So.
Does that mean that international students cannot reduce their income tax by showing their tuition expenses? That
No,
they-
I believe the 1040 NR instructions. I believe that's one of the kind of what do you call it, disadvantages. Like there's certain things that you're not eligible for as U.S. citizens are, and some of the includes credits. Yeah. Yes. Hi.
And just to clarify, you're only talking about deductions and credits here. Your last slide said that was the only purpose of the 1098T. So you're not talking about taxable income here.
Well,
only the deductions and credits.
Well, no, this slide could be either, or it just depends.
Well, basically, the 1098T, you're only getting it's informational, so then you can determine whether how much you have in qualified tuition that you can use as a tax deduction or credit. But be careful, because there is a limit. There is a dollar limit to how much they allow you to take.
Well,
Yeah.
the reason I mention this is that Berkeley does not report SHIP as a qualified expense. So if you use this for purposes of determining
Yeah.
tax-
You're talking about health insurance, right?
Yes.
Yeah. You cannot deduct the health insurance even. It's weird. Basically, if you're a student, since you are required to have health insurance for enrollment, you don't get it will not be imputed income to you. You won't have to report it. The problem that's the definition of qualified scholarships for only that purpose. But then there's another definition of qualified scholarships specifically for those for credits or deductions that you take on your own income tax return. And in that case, they won't let you take a deduction for the health insurance. Only tuition and books and anything specifically for the class. So.
Most people will think of this form and they'll just automatically think credits. Most people. Yeah. All right, let's go to the next slide. Taxable versus non-taxable scholarships. So it's taxable if you receive any fellowships paid towards anything other than tuition fees and supplies or cost of enrollment. So some examples of that it's called non-qualified. Those examples are any payments towards room and board, my favorite word, stipends, travel, and like other living expenses. Oh, that's not my favorite word, stipends, sorry. Reporting of non-qualified scholarships and fellowship payments. So the university is not required to report these payments to the IRS or withhold tax on payments. However, if the payment is to a non-resident alien, the university is required to report it. It's on a 1042S tax form. So I just talked to someone in the Glacier office, and they told me they've already distributed those to you. So it's generally between January 31st and March 15th. Looks like they're good, ahead of schedule. Graduate students are U.S. citizens or resident aliens are required to. So this is different. For non-qualified scholarship and fellowship payments, if you are a U.S. citizen or resident alien, the university won't report this on any tax form, not a 1099, not a 1042S, nothing. But you are required to self-report this on your tax return. And there is a nice IRS publication we could lean you to for instructions on that. You want to talk about this qualified tuition? Yes. Generally speaking, if you're not a U.S. citizen for immigration, so you're a foreign national, so you have a visa, let's say you're on an F visa, and you've been in the country for 2 years, most likely you're going to be considered a non-resident alien. So what that means is the IRS wants to see you do your taxes like a non-resident alien, meaning you follow their rules. Now, if you're in the country a long time, let's say you're in your 6th calendar year and you've met the amount of days threshold, the substantial presence test, the IRS wants to see you like a resident alien now. So it's identical to a U.S. citizen. So the resident alien doesn't mean you're a U.S. person for immigration, but you're a U.S. person for tax.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi.
Do non-resident aliens have to report foreign income?
Oh, that's a great question. We're going to go into a slide like that. Generally, it's probably going to be no, but it just kind of depends on the sourcing. Yeah. You want to talk about this one?
Yeah, sure. So this is the slide on qualified tuition reduction for those of you who are teaching assistants or research assistants. Generally, under tax laws, if you are if you're working for the university and you happen to receive a reduced tuition for graduate level courses, it's subject to income taxes, which you'll have to report. You'll have to report and pay taxes on. But if you're a teaching assistant or research assistant for the University of California, then you might get a tuition remission. If you happen to have a reduction in tuition for services as either a teaching assistant or a research assistant, then the tuition reduction that you receive for graduate level courses, that will not be subject to income taxes. So you're okay there. It's a little provision within the Internal Revenue Code section 117D5. But since you are an employee, I do want to make sure you note that any wages or salaries you do earn from working as a teaching assistant or research assistant will still be subject to income taxes, which will be reported on a W-2.
Okay, who's required to pay for federal income taxes on non-qualified scholarship and fellowship payments? Basically everyone. For the non-resident aliens, we put it depends, because you might be subject to tax, but you might be exempt because of a tax rate or something. So federal income taxes for U.S. citizens and resident aliens. This slide is for any service income, so wages, employee. So they're generally subject to a graduated tax rate on incomes received from all sources. U.S. citizens are taxed on their worldwide income, whether it's sourced here or outside the country. So when reporting this on a tax return, the student may claim appropriate marital status and exemptions. The next slide is for the taxation for non-resident aliens. Generally, the non-qualified scholarship and fellowship payments get reported on 1042S, as we discussed. The statutory tax rate is generally 30%. There is a reduced withholding for certain visas on certain payments for we see a lot of F and J immigration students here. It's cut down to 14%, and then in some cases even cut to 0 if it's exempt through a tax treaty. So important to know, in Berkeley, Glacier is the tax compliance software for foreign nationals. And you could say, hey, my friend is from one country, I'm the same country, he's exempt, I'm exempt. Well, Glacier has to believe you. If you have to prove the certain documents to make sure you're eligible. So it's important to know. This is this slide we were talking about here. So the 3 ways for a non-resident alien to be excluded from income is a foreign source fellowship, or even foreign source services. But foreign source fellowship means, let's say you're getting funds from your country to pay for your cost of living expenses or anything, tuition. Because it's foreign sourced, it's not subject to U.S. tax because it's not U.S. sourced. But there's a kind of you have to be kind of careful, because If it goes to the university and the university holds the money, and then they distribute however they want, it's not considered restricted. So it's kind of a case by case, but foreign source fellowship is one way to exclude from income. Income tax treaty is very common. The Glacier office, I don't know how many treaties they do, but I think they do probably 1,000 or more each year. A grant. The third one is Internal Revenue Code exclusion. So non-resident aliens could be excluded from income. An example is qualified scholarship and fellowships. It's statutory tax provision 117 we discussed for tuition when anything is paid towards tuition and fees. This is an example of the 1042S tax form. We circled boxes. I know it's kind of small, but some of the key figures here is to know the income code. You might see income code 16 if you see fellowship. You might see, I think, 18, 19, or 20. 18, 19, or 20 if you have some service income that's subject to you have a treaty. And then the exemption code is 3 now, right? Or is it 4? Chapter 3,
It's going to be chapter 3,
Chapter 3,
because
yeah.
chapter 4 is for financial
Okay.
products.
Okay, and then the tax rate mentions the federal tax withhold. This is important because when you do your tax return, you need to know, what was the gross income, what was the total withholding amount, and then that last one is your tax ID. So the tax treaty exemption. The tax treaty exemption is this is when a non-resident alien receives a payment, and their country has a treaty with the U.S. and Glacier has determined that, okay, you're eligible. You hit all the requirements. Now that you hit all the requirements, can you sign all these forms and give it to us? So the tax treaty exemption is a IRS. It's a treaty. It's a benefit to you, but it's something that the UC Berkeley cannot just give you automatically. It has to be administered with care. There has to be proper forms signed, and then they have to, they're taking responsibility to facilitate a treaty for you. One form here is the W-8 BEN. You'll generally see that for non-service scholarship, fellowship payments. We'll see it in some other areas too, but it's more for entities. There is another form for treaty, the 8233, but you'll see that for wages, the W-9 as well, but that's wages when they're a resident alien for tax. If you really want to, read a long book, the tax treaty exemption is all mentioned in these publications, 519. I think mainly 519, 901 as well. But you could always contact the Glacier office. So that's part of Central Payroll Office, the Controller's office, and they're very, very helpful. I know them very well.
So there is a possibility that some of you could end up having dual status residency, where you're in 1 year you're both a U.S. resident and a non-resident alien. You may one of the things you might want to consider is going to IRS publication 519 to see if that's the case. You may also contact the Campus International Office to access the Glacier website, so to help you determine whether or not you do have a dual status for the year. All right, so the next one. How do you report any non-qualified fellowships on your income tax returns? So this is for federal income tax purposes right here. Those of you who are U.S. citizens and resident aliens, you'll report your fellowship grants and estimated tax payments on just fellowship grants on IRS, either IRS form 1040 line 7, and the 1040 is just is the form where it encompasses every possible income or deduction or credits you can take. And then, or you could choose or if you don't want to do that, you can use the form 1040A and report the fellowship income on line 7. That's just that one's a simpler form with fewer deduction items. Or if you have very few deduction items, you can report your fellowship income on 1040 EZ line 1. And remember, this is only the taxable fellowships, not the non-taxable ones. With the non-taxable ones, you just don't report it at all. And but here's the thing: these particular line items, in case you don't have any employee status, you may, in case you're just fellows and not, in case you just have fellowship income and not some W-2 item, you'll. Let's see. You have to report it online on those particular lines, even though they're designed for the W-2. So in that case, what you can do if you're doing it by paper is write SCH on the dotted line next to line 7 of the Form 1040 if you're filing that form, or SCH on the left in the space to the left of line 7 of the Form 1040A if that's what you're filing, or in the space to the left of line 1 if you're filing the Form 1040EZ. Now, if you're filing online, it might not let you write SCH. I wouldn't worry too much about it. Just make sure you keep your documents. So then, if the IRS ever asks any questions, hey, why did you have this income but you never had a W-2? You could explain that there was no other place to put it except line 7 or line 1 if you're using the 1040EZ. Now, if you're a non-resident alien, you'll either report your taxable fellowships on either the Form 1040NR line 12, or if you have a very easy one, the 1040NR EZ line 5, again, in this case, those particular line items actually are specifically fellowships, so you won't have to write a SCH next to them.
Two questions. One is fellowship income. They're not subject to FICA, correct?
Right, because you're not an employee of the university, so FICA is only if you're actually employed providing certain services.
And for this fellowship income, do you know generally where it should be done if you're using an online program like TurboTax or H1 Like, should it be under less common income, or is there a nice general direction of what it should be?
I mean, because if they're only showing W-2, they'll probably have something with other income, some kind of choice where you can pick other income, and then you'll have to plug it in that way. Because if you happen to be a U.S. citizen or resident alien, you can't. The university is not going to report on the income, so the IRS will, for the first time, the IRS will be aware of. So when you report it, the IRS will be aware the first time. Whereas if you happen to be an employee, you'll get a W-2, and the IRS will already know about it the moment you receive your W-2 as well.
It has to be under other income. You need to make sure it has SCH next to it.
I don't know if you're going to be able to do that online, but TurboTax is very sequential, so you'll see the income first, and then there's a lot of it that doesn't apply. But then the one that's another, you might even see fellowship. I haven't used TurboTax in a while, but that's where you would enter it in.
It's possible they might put it in another income line item other than line 7. They might, their system, those online systems may or may not throw fellowships into the proper line 7. But at the very least, if you report your income to the IRS and pay the taxes on it, then it's just a simple issue with the way the online systems work. That the IRS will not be too harsh on you for that, because again, you're at least reporting and paying your taxes on the income.
Also, I just want to stress the resident aliens, you cannot use the Glacier FNTR tax software because they consider you as a U.S. person for tax. So you're going to have to do your tax return either this way via hand or TurboTax or a similar company online.
So, in the next slide is an example of Form 1040. This is only for those of you who are U.S. citizens and resident aliens, and 1040 NR. This is for those of you who are non-residents. We're only showing the first page to get to the adjusted gross income. We're not showing the subsequent pages because that's got standard deduction or itemized deductions, and with those you choose based on whatever your tax whatever deductions you have. Yeah.
Are non-resident aliens not writing SCH and the amount?
Yeah, you won't have to, because with the 1040 NR, your fellowship income's already reported on 1042S, and they already have that. They already have a description of that being a fellowship. Yeah. So this is just a simple example. You would report on the line 7 of the IRS form 1040 for those of you who are U.S. citizens and resident aliens, and write SCH if you're doing it by hand. And eventually they'll get you to line 22, which is your total income before any what's called the above the line deductions. Above the line deductions mean deductions that the tax law allows you to take before you even get to adjusted gross income. So over here on line 23, there is education expenses. That's only if you are taking a deduction for your tuition. But remember, with your tuition, which we forgot to mention earlier, if you can only choose either to take a deduction on your income tax return, or you can take it as a tax credit for federal purposes. But you cannot take it for both. You have to choose one or the other. You just choose whichever one gets you the most money. The most money, after all.
Deduction is right there above the line, right?
Yep, that's that's one of those rare above the line deductions, which is usually a good thing. And as an above the line deduction, it'll actually carry over into the California income tax return later. But the tax credit will not. But like I said, you will choose whichever one gets you the most money back.
So so I'm trying to clarify, on line 23, is that where we put the information about our qualified tuition stuff?
Oh, no.
You just never put that on.
Line 23, that is...
Qualified, you don't.
Yeah,
So
so qualified we
117,
don't put on at all. That's
Yeah.
all the tuition stuff that the university
Yeah.
gives us. So what would go on 23 then?
23, so line 23 is pretty much your tuition, but here's the thing, that's only if you decide to take a deduction. If you decide to take a credit, you won't even put it on line 23, you just leave that blank, because again, you can only take either a deduction, or you can take a credit against taxes that were already calculated.
We're not going to offer legal tax advice here, but in school, everybody says a credit is better than a deduction, because a credit is a dollar for dollar back, whereas a deduction, you might only get a portion of that back. But then this is an above the line deduction, so it impacts both federal and state tax returns. So it just depends on on a person.
Yeah. So, but again, though, the deductions and credits, they both have dollar limits. So you only choose whichever one will result in the least amount of taxes you'll have to pay, or if although if you take a credit, if you decide to take the credit and it's more than the actual taxes, you do get refunded for the difference, because the credit itself is a refundable tax credit, one of the rare refundable tax credits.
And for deductions and credits, you're only talking about people who paid more in tuition and fees than they received in scholarship aid, right?
Right. So if your scholarships, if your qualified scholarships or fellowships exceed the tuition or other related expenses, then you can't even use that anymore, because the IRS does not want you double dipping on this stuff.
Is there any part of filing taxes that takes into account like living costs and stuff like that?
Unfortunately, no. It's just all dollar for dollar. It's never been designed for cost of living expenses. All right. So, after you've added up all your income and applied any potential above the line deductions, then you'll get to line 37, which is your adjusted gross income. You'll use that adjusted gross income to help you determine how much federal and state income taxes you'll owe. And then for non-resident aliens, the 1040 NR example, It'll be reported. Your non-qualified fellowships will be reported on line 12, and then you'll get. And then, in this case, your total income from everything will wind up on line 23, and then if you have any above the line deductions, which means above the adjusted gross income, you'll end up deducting those from your income, so you can get to your adjusted gross income and determine your federal and state income taxes. Yeah.
So if I have foreign income which is not reported anywhere here, which is
Right.
my job or my investment, then how is that?
If you're a non-resident alien, if you're a non-resident alien and your sources are your income's completely foreign sourced, that money will not be reported on. You don't report the money here at all because the U.S. only taxes worldwide income on those of you who are U.S. citizens or resident aliens. If you're a non-resident alien, they only care about whatever's sourced in the U.S.
I just want to mention one thing. I've met many students before that tell me, "Oh, I'm receiving foreign source income." Okay, what's happening? Oh, it's subject to tax. I said, "Oh, wow. Okay, well, what's happening? Maybe you need to talk to your department heads higher up because maybe they need to look at it closely because some foreign source, believe it or not, some foreign source fellowship payments, they just go through the system. Nobody knows. They just put it in, and it comes out as income subject to tax. So just to let you know, if you really believe it's foreign source income, probably verify, double check. If I were you personally.
No, it is just something before
Yeah.
and before.
Yeah. Oh, one other thing. It's very small. Line 21, other income for the foreign. So the 1042S, you might get different versions of it. You know, there's the income code. You see 16, 18, 19, or 20, or 50, or no, sorry, 54 now. I think it's 54. 54 is an other income. So if you want a prize and you're foreign, like you want a competition, business competition, it's most likely going to be an other. I think it was 51. Now it's 54. So you would see that on a different income code.
Sorry, this is a pretty basic question, but I've never had 2 jobs in a year. So, like, in line 1 or 7, you would just put both whatever you have on your other W-2 plus whatever you paid
Right.
through your fellowship.
Yeah.
Together.
Add them all together. Yeah, because generally the line 7 of the 1040, it's generally supposed to only be for W-2s, but your W-2 income, but because the IRS never really seemed to do a good job with updating the form to deal with fellowships, they just tell you to stick it all on line 7. So if they know, and the IRS will have a copy of your W-2,
Right,
so
so if they subtract, they'll know how much.
right, and then if they have any questions, just make sure you keep your documents so you can explain to them that that's your fellowship income, which was never reported because you are a U.S. citizen or resident alien. Yeah, I doubt the IRS will. It's not likely the IRS will come back to you. But if it does happen, though, if you have your documents and you can explain it to them what the situation is, then they'll be okay. Oh, one more thing, the IRS will only contact you by mail, like literally snail mail, not email. And not phone, especially not phone calls. So, if you happen to get phone calls or emails from somebody purported to be from the IRS, delete the email or hang up the phone because, by law, the IRS has to contact you by snail mail. It cannot be by phone or email unless.
You can call them, but they can't go the other way around.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's been a lot of tax fraud going on where criminals call people saying you owe us money, or you're going to jail. Just hang up the phone. Yeah.
If you're combining W-2 income with fellowship income for line 7, do you still put the scholarship SEH?
Yeah, you could still just put it up there, and then again, the IRS will have a copy of the W-2 if you happen to have employment, and then they'll notice a difference, and then when they see the SCH, they'll understand. They should at least understand. Yeah, at least they should understand. I can't be completely sure who they hire after all. And a lot of budget cutbacks in the IRS, so it's been a little. Yeah. All right. So next, we got federal tax resources. So these are links to the federal tax resources, publication 515, publication 519, 901, 970, and also some tax treaties and the National Taxpayer Advocate Service. And the IRS does have some federal from some e-filing options online. You may be able to even get free filing options if your adjusted gross income is low, within a certain threshold.
Question.
Yeah.
Can you go back to the other slide that had all the resources?
Yeah.
And supplemental question: is there a way for us to access this with
Oh.
all the links, or?
Well, the top ones you kind of Google it, but I think the bottom ones are links, hyperlinks, right?
Yeah, they're hyperlinks.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you could share the presentation.
Where would we find that then?
So I'll send it to Brad,
Okay.
and they'll send it out.
Okay.
And then again, these are some. The IRS has some vendors like TurboTax that they have for e-filing purposes. Again, if you happen to be within a certain adjusted gross income, they'll have you. The IRS website will have you answer some questions and come up with vendors that may or may not allow you to file for free. The California Franchise Tax Board also has some vendors as well, and some of which may be free, some of which may cost money. And then here are just some instructions on the IRS forms. Yeah.
Just to be clear, non-resident aliens do not file through IRS, but we file through Glacier.
No. Sorry, let me read. So if you're a foreign national,
Yeah.
the Glacier has a tax product, FNTR, that allows you to prepare your tax return. But that's for federal only, and that's only for people in Glacier who are considered non-resident aliens.
Okay.
So if Glacier determined you're a resident alien as of December 31, 2017, that's your filing status. Yeah, and so the FNTR, they won't even do the state. They'll just tell you, oh, make sure you do the 540 NR, by the way. So, yeah.
Yeah.
How do you file state taxes?
Oh, we're gonna get to that. All right. So, California state income taxes. Who are required to pay? If you're a U.S. citizen or resident alien, you're required to pay. Also, if you're a non-resident alien, you're also required to pay because, unfortunately, California does not generally conform to federal tax treaties. And let's see. Those of you who are residents of foreign countries who perform services in California, basically if you're an employee in California or you receive income from California sources, you're usually going to be subject to California state income taxes as well as the withholdings. Because, well, California is a high tax state after all. And high cost of living too. Now, California state income taxes. If you're now the way they classify you is if you're a resident of California or a non-resident of California. If you're a resident of California, you're generally resident of California for income tax purposes. You're generally someone who lives in California for more than 9 months of the year, or you file a resident tax return, or you register to vote in California. And this could apply to any of you who are U.S. citizens, resident aliens, or non-resident aliens. You'll have to. It's best you refer to FTB publication 1031 for the guidelines on the residency status in California. If you're a non-resident in California, California does not require reporting or withholding on fellowship grant payments, except for the portion that's for services, basically if you're an employee of the university. You should definitely review your requirements for self-reporting the fellowship items for California state income tax purposes. Now, how do you report your income for California state income taxes? Y'all remember when we went through the examples to get to your adjusted gross income, right? AGI? Well, hopefully you remember. But anyway, you take the AGI which is adjusted gross income from your federal from the federal income taxes, that last line on that first page of each of those forms. And if you're a California resident, you'll take that AGI and put it on line 13 of FTB Form 540. If you're a non-resident in California, or you've only been a resident of California for part of the year, you'll report on either Form 540 NR long or the 540 NR short. And you take that AGI and put it on line 13 of either of those forms. Now, if you happen to have California income sourced income from California, and it's more than $100,000, you definitely have to use the 540 NR long. That's just the rules. Now, here's an example of 540 for those of you who are full year California residents. You'll take your federal adjusted gross income and put it in that line 13 right there. And if you're a non-resident of California, this is just an example of the long version of the 540 NR. You'll take your adjusted gross income, the federal one, and put it in line 13 right here. And then here are some,
For foreign students can we pay our state taxes on Glacier, or is that separate?
Not on Glacier. Glacier only does federal. Okay. But there are some online options you can. There are some online options on the Franchise Tax Board website. These are just some publications you can look at to help you determine your state residency status or non-resident withholding guidelines if you're a non-resident. And the Franchise Tax Board has a link, has a page for individual taxpayers, and also some filing options which is on this slide 32. And we also have links to the instructions for the FTB forms, 540 forms.
Sorry, you might want to check the Berkeley International Office website. I know they list a lot of workshops. I don't know, at least the last couple of years. I remember they used to, and it used to be also for state as well. We had a state person that came in, so they give the basics.
So, and then these are some university websites that you could also utilize. And if you have any questions, yeah.
Yeah. So I think I was told for residency that we're supposed to file. That we could file like for both the states that we were in if we're trying to establish residency. So for me, I spent part of my time in Washington and had income there. Then I moved here and I have income here. So is the line 13, should that only be the part of my income that I earned in California for the state?
Who's line 13 then?
Line 13 is the adjusted gross income.
You might have to file. You might have to file both state tax forms, but you do want to see the residency requirements because you have income. You said in the other one, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would.
Like if you're a full year if California considers you a full year resident, then you'll definitely have to use the 540 for sure and report both. But if you've only been a resident of California for a part of the year, then you use the 540 NR, and eventually there should either be some adjustments or there should be some adjustments that should help you out, or the other option is, but basically if you're only a California resident for a part of the year, then California will only tax you on the source that was only from California. So in that case you could try to see where what adjustments you can make, but if you can't make any because the 540 NR, it may have some adjustment items you can remove, but if not, chances are you would just have to report the California income only.
And you have to be careful. Look at that FTB Pub 1031 because there's guidelines. Where are your bank accounts? Mm-hmm. Did you buy a house here? Oh, I have so many family here. They have a facts and circumstances test, so you might want to check that out.
And it's like if you, and then things, so things like if you've been in California at least 9 months, or
That's
if you,
the general, yeah.
or if you've registered to vote in the state, that could just trigger a full year residency, especially in a high tax state like this one.
Yeah, and so so for those of us who are trying to become California state residencies, also for tuition purposes, part of it is that we had to register for vote and a number of other things. So then, on those terms, we are California residents.
Yeah, that could potentially
two different criteria. You know, this is the tax filing for the franchise tax board, so you have to, that might not always be in line.
Because with California, they're very aggressive. If you just triggering one or two of those criteria could easily cause California to determine to believe that your intent was to be a California resident the whole year. That because unfortunately a lot of tax laws can be facts and circumstances and can be pretty broad too. They can work in your favor or they can work against you depending on the facts and circumstances. Yeah.
Okay, so if you do end up using the 540 for residents of California, but if you lived in another state for a couple months, does that mean you'd file as a non-resident in that other state?
In that other state, if you had income over there, generally speaking, if you don't trigger their residency, if you don't trigger their residency requirements, chances are they'll have some kind of non-resident filing if you had income over there.
You might want
income that's sourced from over there.
You might also want to look at the requirements on their tax agency website. Just say, I don't know, Connecticut. Who's required to file? Who should file? Who must file?
Yeah,
stuff like that.
Like if you were an employee over at another state, then you have to report in that other state because that state will have your W-2.
Slightly unrelated, but fellowship income is not considered earned income, and so with it you cannot contribute to retirement.
That's right, because earned income is considered. You have to actually be an employee to have earned income.
So if you're a TA and you get W-2, that's earned income. And if you just get a fellowship stipend, that's not earned income.
Right.
You could have both. You could have, people have both, right?
Yeah. I mean, I mean, are you at least half? Is at least half your employment under employee side, or?
No, it's all just fellowship.
Yeah. Because basically you can only take your W-2 for the earned income portion.
Right.
For anything about earned income and what retirement funds you could put in, you might want to consult a financial advisor on that one.
Double check that it's unearned income.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I just say one thing?
Yeah.
I have to go, but I'm sure they're welcoming more questions. But have any of you heard of the ASUC Student Legal Clinic VITA program? So the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program takes appointments to do free taxes. So if you're interested in doing a one-on-one appointment, I'm sure if you can get all of your answers to all of your questions here, that's fantastic. But you can also look on their website. It's free. It's on campus. So I just wanted to give you that resource. Yeah.
Is it also for international students?
Yeah. So they do. So on their website, which I just pulled up, they do foreign student taxes. Yes.
And what's it called again?
It's called the VITA program. It's the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program, VITA, and it's through the ASUC Student Legal Clinic. So it'll say on there the types of taxes they can do and the types that they cannot do. So I just wanted to say that before I leave, so that people can. And I wish I would have said that before a lot of people left, but tell your friends. Anyway, so thank you so much. I have to go, but I'm sure. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it.
So this is just the IRS filing website. Scroll down a little bit. So they do have it's a little different than
free e-file. Free file.
Yeah. Let's try actually, free tax return preparation for a qualifying taxpayer. So this is one of the. What is? Okay, and then e-file options right here. So this is the IRS website. They have some They have some. They may have some free software. That is. Oh, the IRS changed their website recently.
I think you're looking for the example of the certain
Oh,
companies, right? The
Here it
vendors?
is. Yeah, there it is. Thank you. Sorry about that.
There
Yeah, so they'll ask you some. So they'll ask you some questions. If your adjusted gross income is, if they determine your adjusted gross income will be under 66,000, then they'll give you some free software tools. So you would just simply click Start Free File Now, and then they'll ask you a bunch of questions to determine whether to help determine whether or not you qualify for some kind of free software that free online software you can use to file federal income taxes.
So if you guys have any other questions, Ben and I mean, we'll stay here for a few and answer questions if you need. To, we'll stay here for a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you.